Hey friends, this is day 400 of Russian war against Ukraine. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of global events which have a Ukrainian dimension, which pretty much any global event that's happening right now seems to have that dimension because the war in Ukraine, as we have said many times, is not a regional conflict. It is a global war. It's just happening on Ukrainian soil. So before we go into our two main topics, which would be the visit of Xi Jinping to Russia and what that means, and the second one being President Putin's decision to place his nukes in Belarus. Before that, we need to dispel one myth. It seems to me like a lot of the theories that are criticizing President Biden and European Union, NATO, European Union, and leaders seems to be predicated on one false belief, which is that everything is going to according to Putin's plan, and the rest of the world is just reacting as though he's some sort of geopolitical genius, and everybody else is playing catch up, as though Putin is playing 3D chess while everybody else is playing checkers. It's a narrative which is propagated by Putin's propaganda. First of all, because they're saying like he's so smart, he's outsmarted every other leader, and it's a talking point which has been around since at least 2014 when they initially invaded Ukraine, but it is a myth. The thought, the idea, the argument that everything is going to according to Putin's plan, that he is moving his pieces as he wants, and in the rest of the world, President Biden and European presidents like Macron, like Steinmeier, like Chancellor of Germany, whatever his name, Scholz, that they're just merely reacting, trying to catch up to him. That is demonstrably false. Putin is scrambling. The thing did not go according to his plan. His plan, as you know, has been to take Kiev within 3 days at least, or 5 days at the most, and then a couple of weeks on the rest of Ukraine. It did not go according to plan. In fact, Putin is the one who's playing catch up. Putin is the one who's scrambling. He's the one who's trying to figure out what to do in the situation that he has been placed in. And we can cite a few pieces of evidence for this. Number one is that the goals that his propaganda was declaring for the Ukrainian invasion or special military operation, as they put it, was to take Ukraine within 2 weeks and Kyiv within 3 days. That didn't go according to plan. Number two, we can cite his annexation of territories, which happened in the fall last year. And as he was announcing them, Ukraine was freeing those territories. As he was saying, as he was putting into law that these are now Russian territories, Ukrainians were kicking Russians out of that territory. That did not go according to plan. His partial mobilization, well, partial of course is in quotes because it was not partial at all, in September was a move that he had to do because his army was evaporated on the battlefields of Ukraine. That's something that cost him a lot of support and a lot of his rating points, which is something that the only thing that gives him legitimacy. He had to do that. We can cite his much touted New Year's offensive and his mocking statements that, oh, we really haven't started anything yet, which was picked up by some of the Westerners. It's like, oh, look, Russia has really not started anything yet. Once they are ready, they'll evaporate Ukraine, as Lieutenant McGregor was saying. Ukraine hasn't seen anything yet. Bullshit. Russian offensive did start in January, and they got their asses kicked under a Ukrainian town called Ugledar, and that was it. That's what Russia is. It's all about posturing, and then there is nothing for them to show behind their much arrogant words. So the entire war is not going according to Putin's plan. He's trying one thing after another. There is infighting between his elites, his commanders, generals, his politicians. One very telling phone call was leaked between an oligarch and one of his propagandists or music producer, and they are they're not happy with Putin. They're calling him the Satan. They are just covering him in all kinds of swearing because he had spoiled their lives because of the sanctions and stuff like that. It's not going according to Putin's plan. So let's stop thinking that. Let's stop saying that. Let's stop. It's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you if you see every event as though it's going according to Putin's plan, of course, every event will be an evidence to that. So let's put that idea aside and continue with the news, knowing that it's not going according to his plan. He's not playing 3D chess. He is catching up, and he is trying to do everything he can to stymie the Ukrainian offensive before the Western help gets to Ukraine. And Western help, I mean the artillery systems, the tanks, the armored vehicles, Bradleys, and all of that. So topic number one for us to discuss here is Putin's statement that he's going to place some of the nuclear weapons that he has in the shafts that they're building in Belarus, and that's going to be ready by July 1. What does it mean? First of all, it's a message not to Ukraine, because the ballistic missiles that he has now can reach Ukraine from where they are. But this is a message to the West, and as you know, that this is a war really on the West, with Ukraine being the front lines. This is a message to the West that we are getting closer, and of course. Formally, this is a response to the promise of Great Britain to supply Ukraine with tank ammo, which contains depleted uranium. For some reason, Putin thinks it's nuclear. Of course, depleted uranium is not nuclear. Enriched uranium is nuclear. But he's saying, oh, we're going to give you a proportional response. So, and that's what it's all about. It's a message about a proportionality of the response. This is actually nothing new, because historically, whenever NATO was placing their either bases or weapon sites closer to Russian territory, they had to respond in kind, not to look weak. This move is also symbolic and not real, because in Kaliningrad region, which is the little Russian enclave in Europe, they already have shafts with nuclear weapons there. So there is no point to place anything else in Belarus, because they have something a lot closer to Europe already in Kaliningrad. So why would you do that? And the answer, of course, is because it's a message. It's symbolic. They don't want to look weak. They want to say that, well, look, we're getting closer to you, because they perceive, or at least their propaganda perceives, that that NATO is trying to overtake Russia. Of course, this is BS, because if NATO ever had a chance to overtake Russia, this would have been in 1991, when Russia was nothing, the army was non-existent. Instead, what NATO countries did, they helped Russia throughout the 90s. So, of course, that narrative is BS. So, what is interesting about that, about displacement, is that it violates one of the memoranda or the pacts that Russian President Putin has signed with Xi Jinping, which not 10 days ago they had signed. And the memoranda was about non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. So, by deciding to place the nuclear missile shafts in Belarus, Putin violates the agreement that he made with Xi Jinping 10 days ago. So it doesn't make any sense, which could tell you about the decision-making process that's happening, about Putin not being in control of the situation or really moving any world events. He's merely reacting. He's trying to do whatever he can situationally, not strategically. As evidence to this not being a significant event, we are not seeing any world leaders react in any significant way to what Putin is doing. Have you heard anybody commenting on it? Nobody does it. And it's sort of become a situation of a boy who cried wolf. So since the beginning of the war, I think day 4 of war against Ukraine, Putin had commanded his defense minister Shoigu that we have to bring to level 2 or whatever our nuclear arsenal, because this is the time to use for it. And since then, they have been bringing up this topic once in a while when they wanted to show that nothing is lost yet, and we really haven't started anything yet, and the whole defense doctrine of Russia. So by now, when Russia is talking about nuclear weapons and we're hinting at that we're ready to deploy it, nobody's really paying attention, except for Ukraine, who has called an emergency UN security meeting, and a lot of analysts that I follow, and I tend to agree with them in my dilettante mind, of course, is that Ukraine should not have done that either, because pretty much everybody understands that this is posturing, this is not a real threat, and Putin's not going to do anything about launching nuclear weapons anywhere in the West. And by the way, the narrative that we're hearing from some of the commentators or dilettantes in the West, or even some experts, is like, oh, we would rather avoid a nuclear meltdown than forfeiting some territory to Russia. That is, I don't know. I don't get people in the West. It's like in America, everybody's free. Everybody has a gun. Like, nobody's going to tell me what to do. And then when it comes to Ukraine, we're like, oh, we don't want to provoke Russia. Let's just give them some territory, give in to whatever they want. You have to understand what Russia is. You have to understand the history of nuclear weapons and stuff like this. They're all about posturing. And people in the know, people who make decisions, like Secretary Blinken, for example, they make nothing of it, and neither should you. And of course, officially, they will tell you, like when I was talking to General Hodges, officially he will tell you, we should always take these threats seriously, and I agree with that. But of course, nobody gives any more than 0.5% to Russia actually using nuclear weapons. Number two, not president, he's the secretary of the Communist Party of China. Xi Jinping visited Russia about a week ago, 10 days ago, and the question is, what came out of it? And of course, we can only judge by indirect evidence, because they had not made any solid agreements or statements. But from what we can say is that was not a successful trip for Xi Jinping, because he actually left a full one light day earlier than he was planning to, because he was going to stay for 3 days, and now he left on the morning of the third day. And the reason that we know that it did not go well for him is because they had not made any concrete statements. They did say that in, I think, the press release from the Chinese side, that the relationship with Russia has reached its peak. We're going to be great partners economically and whatever. But it's important to understand that we're not forming any kind of alliance against other countries, and which was Putin's goal number one. He wanted military aid from China because there is it's called ammo hunger. The rockets, the missiles that Russia's been launching in Ukraine, they're depleting. The machinery that they have, they can't keep up with repairing them. So Russia really needs help from the outside. And by the way, one more evidence that Putin is not controlling the situation is that they have tried to recruit mercenaries from the Middle East, and that had happened actually a little bit, because there's video evidence of Ukrainian soldiers taking captive some Syrians in Ukraine, and then now they're talking about importing 500,000 or actually 30,000 special forces from North Korea. So Putin needs help from the outside, and he was hoping that Xi Jinping was going to give him at least some weapons, at least some ammo. Nothing like that is going to happen. In fact, there was a scandal from a Chinese manufacturer of drones, of civil drones, which Russians have reprogrammed to use for military purposes, and even that got shut down. So we know that Putin didn't get what he wanted. And additional evidence that the trip was a nothing burger was that Putin, with his decision to put nukes into Belarus, broke one of like 5 agreements, that one of the pacts that they had made with Xi Jinping. So he doesn't feel like he owes Xi Jinping anything, because he didn't get anything out of that meeting. So any theories about, well, now China and Russia are going to form the super pact, that's being dispelled. They're saying that they're not forming. I mean, China's saying that we're not forming anything. China is squashing any channels of weaponry moving into Russia by private means. So there is no reason to worry about that by any indication. So that's that. We're seeing that anything that's happening in the world does have a reflection, or does have Ukraine war as a causation. We see that a lot of geopolitical relationships are being rewired, redrawn because of the war in Ukraine, because we're seeing that this is not a regional thing. This is not a border conflict like Ron DeSantis had suggested. Of course, he had walked that back, so I'm cool with him. But we are seeing that the system of security of the world that has been formed after World War II is now changing. So we're going to see a new world, a new security system in which different countries are vying to have a position. So we'll keep watching what's happening. Of course, everybody's anticipating the major counteroffensive of Ukrainian forces in late April or May, and that's, by different statements, going to be something to look forward to, because the potential that's being gathered on the eastern borders of Ukraine is great. So we're expecting some great results, something that will be more spectacular than Kharkiv and freeing of Mariupol, Kherson in the fall. So let's keep our fingers crossed for the armed forces of Ukraine and wait for the victory of Ukraine. Thank you, friends, for listening to these updates and sharing this stuff. We know that we will win. Ukraine would have been in big trouble if we had not gotten help from the United States, Germany, France, Baltic countries. So thank you for that, and thank you for supporting Ukraine.